Welcome to our webinar this afternoon, Modern Documents and Communications in a Digital World, presented by ExpertTalk and SMA. Our speakers for this webinar will be Mark Breeding, partner at SMA, David Squibb, Chief Sales and Marketing Officer at ExpertTalk, and Kate Merrigan, Supervisor, Underwriting Systems Analyst at Coverys. Mark, I will now let you introduce our agenda for this afternoon and start the conversation.
Thanks, Pam. Well, we have a lot we're going to try to cover today. As Pam said, I'm a partner with Strategy Meets Action. I'm going to share some of our research and our insights in the whole area of customer communications and document management. And so I want to set the context first by talking a little bit about the digital connected world, then go into how customer communications has evolved and where we are today, and then close out with the discussion of managing forms, documents, and communications. At that point, I'll turn it back to Dave, who will give some perspective on what ExpertTalk is seeing in the market in terms of customer communications. And then we'll have a discussion with Kate from Coverys around their usage of ExpertTalk and a success story in this space. And I'll close it out with a call to action for insurers. So first of all, there's really no doubt that the world's becoming more and more digital every day. The amount of data that's generated for and from smartphones and tablets and wearables and cars and all kinds of devices is increasingly making our world connected. And there's so much data out there, they're having to invent new terms like yottabytes and zettabytes and those kinds of things. And it's not just that there's more digital data or more places, that's kind of interesting, but what's more important is that the expectations customers have about how you interact with them are changing. They expect more personalization, the frequency of the interactions is increasing, and the level of service that they expect is higher. Now, at the same time, insurers have ongoing operations to consider. There are many opportunities to improve the fundamental ways that customer documents and communications are created and managed. So there are great opportunities to leverage new ways to communicate and this new digital data, but it's also important that insurers take care of business first and then blend in these new capabilities. And with those new digital interactions, it's also important to realize that although we're in the digital world and we have all this digital content and these devices that we use, there's still an awful lot that's delivered via paper. And so we have to manage that side of the business as well. And ultimately, you need a platform to support today's business and the future. Let me just give a big picture of the insurance industry, first of all. So there's no doubt that there is a transformation underway in the industry. This is research we've done stretching back to 2010 that shows the mode that insurance companies are in. And we've defined those 4 modes there over on the right. And the big picture here is you can see in the orange that the percentage of insurers that are saying we are transforming has dramatically grown to now almost half of all P&C insurers. A very large portion are growing, are successful, and there's a small portion at the bottom that are struggling, either just sustaining with no growth or very low growth or barely surviving. But when we speak with senior executives, you know, there is a new energy, there's lots of investment, there's a lot of interesting innovation activities as insurers are really thinking differently about how we transform and how we really deal with this new environment in the digital world that we're in. Let me just talk briefly about some of the trends we see, because I think all of this affects the way we interact with agents and with policyholders. There are several big trends I think that are important. Digital, we've already talked about, and customer expectations. But in addition to that, you know, most insurers are struggling or thinking through what what do we need to do regarding innovation? How do we create a culture of innovation and think differently? What do we do about the sharing economy? Because that is shifting the landscape of risk, right? There are new opportunities for insurance coverages. There are new risks that are occurring because of car sharing or home sharing or bike sharing or those kinds of things. New ecosystems are popping up. So the companies and the services around, let's say, your car or your home or your business, it's different than it has been in the past. You know, from an insurance perspective, we can't just think about, you know, the carrier working through an intermediary to the policyholder or working direct to the policyholder. Now there may be companies in other industries that we're partnering with. There may be other kinds of devices and capabilities we have to be aware of. So this all shapes the environment of how we need to think about communicating with customers in the future. And there, of course, are a number of emerging technologies that have the potential to dramatically change the industry. Some of them are more physical technologies like the Internet of Things and wearable devices and drones. Others are more in the virtual domain, artificial intelligence, which has gotten probably the #1 technology in the last year for the insurance industry. So much interest and activity around various kinds of artificial intelligence. But you also have others like gamification and blockchain and new payment technologies that are making a difference. And all these technologies, they don't just provide some capabilities for operational efficiencies for insurers. That is certainly there. But they also help to change the risks that need to be covered. And, you know, in our case here for this webinar, they provide new and different ways that customers need to be interacted with. So it's part of the platform I talked about, thinking about where customer communications are headed in the future and being able to have a platform that will support some of that in the future. And then, of course, we've all these connected world domains, whether you're life insurance or whether it's around buildings or businesses or the transportation environment, which is also rapidly changing. So let me talk just a little bit about the evolution of customer communications. This is a diagram that we've been using that seems to resonate with folks. When you think about customers in today's world, and whether it's an individual or whether it's a business customers, we're all living in this world, and we're all used to dealing with Google and YouTube and Amazon and Uber and all these kinds of companies that are providing new ways to do business. So, you know, whether we like it or not, these are the kind of best practices that people are thinking about, right? For building awareness, Google; for education, YouTube, and so forth. And frankly, often people are thinking, why can't my insurer provide some of these capabilities? Why can't my insurer interact with me in some of these easy ways and provide some of these capabilities? Now, we can all provide excuses or reasoning as to why it's more difficult and the insurance industry is different. But in the end, it doesn't matter because these are expectations that are being set. So they have to be factored in as we're thinking about our plans for how we communicate with agents and with policyholders. So customer communications have been evolving and changing, and these are some of the key elements I would say must be considered today. Personalization is mandatory. No more dear policyholder letters. You know, there has to be an awareness of who the customer is, what kind of relationship they have with you, where they are in their journey with you, in the life cycle of the product that they own that you're communicating about. You know, and that has a lot of implications for how we build the right documents and communications that have that kind of information in there to support the personalization. That we're moving towards a more real-time world where more real-time communications via text messaging and other means are needed. It's an omni-channel world. So omni-channel, which I'll talk about in a minute, is not multi-channel. It's an evolution beyond multi-channel, which is something important to consider. More interactions, right? I mean, the industry in general, we're used to, perhaps communicating with policyholders, especially, really just a couple of times a year in many cases. Sure, we may have a ACH payment that's happening every month, but that's automatic and that's really not an interaction. But generally, we don't have that many touch points, and we see that increasing over time in this digital connected world. Mobile first. We're in a mobile world too, so every communication we think about has to be mobile ready. You have to assume that people might be viewing it on some kind of a mobile device. And then finally, we're starting to see more and more usage of chatbots, of virtual assistants, of other ways to provide interactions with customers. Let me talk a little bit about the channel evolution that we're seeing. As I mentioned, the industry for a long time has been in a multi-channel environment. We have contact centers, we have agents, we have websites, we have maybe affinity groups that we're dealing through. There's all kinds of channels that we might be reaching our customers, and that's goodness, right? That we offer those kinds of options and reach new segments. But a lot of times in the multi-channel environments, there's not brand consistency. It looks and appears like that you might be dealing with a different company or a different part of the company. Often we're requiring customers or agents to re-enter data or to repeat something they've already told us. We don't always have an awareness of where the customer is in the journey. There could have been a claim submitted yesterday, but if they come in through a different channel in this multi-channel environment, perhaps we don't even know about that, and it could be something that's very important. And typically, we're thinking about creating digital content by channel, for channel. Here's the content I'm creating for the web. Here's the content I'm creating to push out, through or to be available through, an IVR contact center situation, for instance. So if you look at all these attributes in the middle here, and then move over to the omni-channel side, you see what we're trying to do with the omni-channel environment that people are striving for is to create a single consistent brand so that there is no re-entry of data. It is a true single view of the customer, and we're able to create content and manage it in a way that we can create it once and use it for these various channels because we're aware of the formats and the form factors of devices, and we can push out content that will be usable in any of these channels, supporting real-time updates and really moving towards the point where transactions aren't aligned to channels. So we can essentially do any transaction through any channel. Now, I will tell you that no one is there yet in this true full omni-channel environment, but there's a lot of movement in that direction and has a lot of implications for how we manage our documents and our communications and create and deliver that content. Then I really see three big areas for innovation, 3 Ps: product customization, personalized interactions, and a proactive approach. So this is what we see a lot of companies doing to try to become more customer-centric, is customizing the product to satisfy customer needs, doing the personalized interactions that I mentioned, and then becoming more proactive. And this gets into some of the opportunities coming up in the connected world to become more of a trusted partner. And what that means in practice is that there will be, orders of magnitude more communications, many more touch points as we try to form a different relationship with customers. So it's pretty exciting on the one hand because there are great opportunities for us as an industry, but also it has a lot of implications for the technology platforms that we need to put in place now to support that as that evolves over the next few years. All right, I want to talk a little bit about managing forms, documents, and communications, because on the one hand, it's everybody's interested in thinking about the future and the connected world and all of these cool technologies out there. On the other hand, as I mentioned at the top, you've got a business to run, and we still have to deal with forms and with all kinds of different documents, and with regulations and the daily high volume transaction flows of these activities, and figure out how to make them more efficient and move them to the next level as well. So let me talk first about kind of a big picture of inbound and outbound communications. When you look at all the types of communications that occur, both on the inbound and the outbound side, you quickly realize how complicated and how important this is. And this is just a view across the insurance value chain, and it has just a few examples of kinds of things, kinds of ways we're communicating in those areas. And even if you just focus on one business area in the value chain, there's still a variety of communications that need to be managed. Various kinds of forms, documents, letters, statements, other communications that you have to create, manage, deliver, and track and analyze. So there's a lot going on here. Now, what's interesting is that for most of these communications, for many of them at least, there's still a form to fill out, or there's a template to use in creating the communication. There are digital assets like logos and signatures that need to be managed. There are regulations that need to be complied with. There's internal branding guidelines, and there's a lot of other dimensions that come into the formation of even some of the simple communications that are needed here. So as we've been discussing, you want to do all this in a way that is efficient, presents a consistent brand, complies with regulations, is personalized, is mobile ready, and just meets all of those characteristics that we were mentioning in terms of today's customer communications world. Now let's talk about outbound communications in some more detail. And this is a pretty busy diagram here, but I'll step you through this one by one. So let's just look at the left-hand side first. One way to think about all the documents and other communications is that some are regulated and others are not. Now, the ones that are regulated, this is a pretty important distinction, because if they're regulated, there's a whole set of organizations, of standard forms, circulars, regulatory rules, other things that must be used and adhered to. And you see ISO and NCCI for workers' comp there up on the top, and state regulatory bodies that get involved with some forms as well. Now, for both the regulated and unregulated documents, you also have company-specific rules and guidelines for branding, for consistency, for company policies. Now, in the middle there, on the left-hand side, recognize that for these forms and documents, there's a process to design, to build, to approve, and to ultimately publish these for use. And as you all know, I mean, this is a complicated area, because there can easily be thousands, or in some cases, tens of thousands of different forms and templates that are used by an individual insurance company to meet all of these different needs. So that's that creation side of things, with the kinds of things that are created and how they're created. If we jump all the way over to the right-hand side, on the distribution side of things, there's a variety of formats that might be used to deliver through a variety of channels. So you have to have the capability to create the digital content and then adapt it to the needs of various file formats, various devices that people may be using. And so, need all that flexibility in the platform. Now, we turn to the middle section here in this diagram. This is where we find that a modern customer communications management platform, a CCM platform, is what makes all of this possible. And it's even becoming more important as time goes on because of some of the things that we've talked about. Now, the more that platform understands about forms requirements and the process for developing and publishing forms and templates, the more they understand, the better. And a CCM platform needs to address the types of customer requirements we've discussed up there in the top middle, the personalization and so forth, as well as a lot of very important administrative requirements in the bottom middle, the auditability of those things that are being created, the security, which is very, very important today, compliance, and of course to be efficient and effective in the way that those things are created. So at this stage, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Squibb. And Dave, maybe you can talk about what ExpertTalk has been seeing in the CCM and document space and how this kind of relates to your view of the world.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So, those are some great insights. We are seeing as we work with the industry as well that, some of the things you've shared about, the shift towards personalized communication and real-time interaction with customers and even omni-channel delivery are the things that we see every day. And the carriers that are turning to us are really focused on, how do we respond to the shift of our customer base that we now need to have more high value engagement, right? Companies and carriers that are focusing on growth and retention of those customers, right? How do they respond to those expectations, right? You shared some thoughts about, we're all being conditioned by our experience with Amazon and Uber and, Airbnb and the way that we interact in today's world, I think is shaping the way that we want to interact with our carriers as well. So as customer expectations are shifting, carriers need to think about communications as more than just documents that I need to mail out or insurance forms that I need to mail out to my customers because that's what the regulatory bodies tell me I need to do. So we see a huge trend towards digitalization. And things like customers, we call it the 24-hour customer. They want to interact with our us carriers, where they want, when they want, and how they want. And so as insurance carriers, the ability to make it easy to do business with them and really protect those customers from being kind of courted by the competition. So the ability to be responsive. So Mark, I'd like to look at the slide you shared just a minute ago around forms and templates, right? And as we work with companies, and what we've tried to do as a solution provider is really respond to this entire kind of life cycle. So even if we start way over at the left, with a lot of the process that companies go through. And so we've introduced a solution that really allows carriers to manage the entire process of whether it's a regulatory form approval or the entire product design of a new product that they want to introduce for a niche market. And really tracking that through the entire process, not just how do I build it in a piece of technology, but how do I manage that in the approval of marketing and legal and all of the stakeholders within the company, all the way through to approval to the regulatory body. And then, of course, all of whether they're regulated documents with pre-built regulatory content like ISO forms or pre-built templates around things like claims correspondence. So the ability to introduce these things in a very rapid fashion that can go through the approval process and then be pushed through to that customer communications platform. And that platform we look at from that kind of design side, whether it be on the the outbound, how do we design document templates, as well as on the inbound data capture side, right? Electronic applications and e-onboarding and interaction with agents, and the ability to do that in a very rapid way without having to rely on necessarily changing our core systems and the legacy code that's there. And then on the opposite end of that, we see that once those assets have been designed and the ability to quickly deploy them, and then integrate that solution into their core system so that they can rapidly deploy that. And then we also take a look at the compliance side of that, and how do we assure that we have built is meeting both the regulatory requirements as well as the requirements of what we have done, both from do these communications look the way they want from a visual auditing perspective, but then also are we handling all of the content requirements, whether they be legal, marketing, or regulatory. And then ultimately, how do we take those communications, whatever they might be, and deliver those out to our customers in a way that interacts and allows them to interact with us the way that they want. And through omni-channel delivery, regardless of whether it's the traditional print, whether it's through electronic communications and supporting things like mobile or social, or even sending things out like a text with an access link into a policy document or a claims letter. So we look at it holistically from start to finish across the entire life cycle. And it's interesting to see SMA's perspective, because obviously our solution aligns directly, and we've kind of looking at that, taken a look at that holistically, right? And if you just kind of go to that next view, right, which is really how our solution is really formulated, we look at it as a way to take out that nightmare of that customer communication piece, whether it be inbound or outbound, and become that link between the internal systems that a carrier has to manage and maintain, and is really the lifeblood of their system and the lifeblood of their existence, all the way through to getting that communication in the hands of their customers in a much more dynamic way. So just, by way of who we are as a company, we are a company that this is what we do all day, every day. Every company, every carrier that's out there, unless they're a startup, they're producing documents today. But what we see is companies turning to us when they have to, respond more quickly, or they're tethered to technology that isn't working for them. And so, whether it's our ISO partnership where we can deliver ISO content very quickly, or our patented migration technology where we can take legacy-based templates and migrate them. You'll hear from Kate Merrigan in just a minute, and this was a situation that at Coverys they were experiencing, where they had a legacy document technology, and we were able to very quickly, with our migration technology, bring them over to the ExpertTalk modern technology. And now with an easy-to-use Microsoft Word-based template designer and an open architecture, they're very able to quickly respond to the dynamic needs that they have with their customers. So again, we are focused on this every day, and glad to see that what SMA is seeing is exactly what we're seeing in the industry as well. So thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Dave. So I had a perspective that I shared with you. Dave shared a solution that ExpertTalk has, and now we're going to ask you to talk about the business problem that you had and how you addressed it with this solution. So first of all, can you just provide a little bit of background on Coverys?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. So just for some background, Coverys provides medical professional liability coverage to healthcare providers and facilities across the United States. We insure anyone from an individual nurse practitioner all the way to the complex healthcare systems. Our coverage is written on primary and excess basis. We write excess over self-insured retentions. We do reinsurance agreements, and we also have a surplus lines company, so that's harder to place risk. I work in product development, which supports the policy issuance of 6 of our 8 underwriting companies. Our department handles the development of the product suite, filing our forms, rates, and rules with state regulators, and then once approved, implementing the product, which is what my team is responsible for. We make sure we have the data we need from the system, we code the templates, and we design and write the logic to generate the policy documents. We also design the document print workflows and maintain the staff resources. Personally, I've been with Coverys for just over 10 years now. I started in underwriting, and then a little over 6 years ago, I moved to product development, and I've been managing our policy issuance since then. When I started in product, we had 2 underwriting companies and a risk retention group. Since then, we've acquired 4 additional underwriting companies, created the surplus lines company, we've rebranded twice. So I've been here through lots of changes, some of which we'll talk about today.
Wow, so you really have your hands full, Kate, with what you just described.
Yeah, there's lots going on.
Yeah, what made you start looking for a solution to improve your customer communications?
So we've been generating our policy documents using the Caligo iStream suite, which is no longer supported. We were operating Caligo from a virtual machine that was running on Windows XP. Our machines are running on Windows 7, so there were already some compatibility issues there. We actually waited a bit longer than we would have preferred to because we had just completed 2 major
solutions. What made you start looking for a solution to improve your customer communications?
So we've been generating our policy documents using the Caligo iStream suite. That's no longer supported. We were operating Caligo from a virtual machine running on Windows XP. Our machines are running on Windows 7, so there were already some compatibility issues there. We actually waited a bit longer than we would have preferred to, just because we had completed 2 major projects recently. One replacing our core systems, so policy billing and claims, and then one to consolidate the 3 product suites our admitted companies were using onto one standard set of forms. So it's not the best idea to change all of your policy systems and all of your forms at once, and then also try to change the piece that makes them speak to each other. So after we went live with those projects, we waited until we had adjusted to those changes before focusing on replacing Caligo.
Okay, and can you briefly describe your project requirements?
Sure. So first, we need to take our active form templates and convert them to the new solution, leaving us either in the same place or better off than before, ideally with no interruption. Our products are typically issued as a commercial liability package policy, which can include additional liability coverages. So our policy documents range in size from 1 page to upwards of 500 or 600 pages, depending on the number of scheduled providers and entities and coverages purchased. So we needed this to be pretty seamless. We were also hoping to increase our ability to match the growing complexity of our customers and take greater advantages of the new core system and revised product set. Aside from the conversion, we were looking for greater flexibility when it came to printer selection. We were hoping to have the option to remove our trigger logic from the policy system, which would allow us to increase speech production. And we also wanted to redesign some of our internal workflows if possible.
Okay, great. And of course, there's a lot of solutions out there in the marketplace that address various aspects of this. Why did you choose ExpertTalk?
So without question, the major selling point was the migration tool. Other vendors were giving us estimates of 6 months or more to fully convert our templates, either because they had to create them from scratch, or they had to convert and then recode them to work with our product. So ExpertTalk came with the capability to automatically convert the Caligo documents using their migration tool, cutting that time to about 4 weeks, I think. This time-saving conversion translated into cost savings, which allowed us to stay within budget and also look at other ways to expand the scope of our project a bit. In terms of the product itself, it had everything we were looking for while providing the flexibility that we need. As we continue to expand and acquire underwriting companies, we need to have the option to file and implement our standard product suite for those new companies, regardless of what policy systems they're using. So ExpertTalk allows us to store and use one set of templates while mapping to multiple data sources. Models provides us the added flexibility when we integrate our systems and make these changes less disruptive for our customers. From a timing perspective, our timelines tend to be tighter than what the standard system releases allow for. If a state changes a regulation, we have to respond to that, and we have to respond to it quickly. Using a separate platform allows us to push changes to production without worrying as much about release scheduling. It also allows us to track what's happening with the policy issuance more cleanly. We maintain separate SQL tables for document issuance, so we can easily recreate what was sent to policyholders. So we were pleased that we'd be able to maintain that structure. And then aside from the actual solution, we were looking at the vendors themselves in terms of stability, experience with similar conversions, and the general desire to work with us. Of the solutions we looked at, we were impressed with ExpertTalk's response to our RFP. But when we sat through the vendor demos, we had several side conversations that showed us they were really looking to partner with us to find a solution rather than just sell us their product.
Okay, great. Now, since implementing the solution, what benefits and ROI have you experienced?
So we're coming up on 8 months since implementation. I'd say the greatest benefit we've experienced has been an improvement to our policy review and print workflows. So as I mentioned before, we recently completed a core system replacement and also changed our entire product suite. So as you adapt to major projects like that, there are undoubtedly going to be changes you didn't anticipate, manual processes put in place while you figure them out. As a result of those, underwriting has been manually reviewing their policies and to ensure accuracy prior to mailing. So before the ExpertTalk conversion, this review was done using a paper copy of the policy after it had posted an image to our online agency portal. So this means that the document was printed, brought to the underwriter the following day, reviewed. If it was okay, it was sent back to the mailroom and mailed a day later at the earliest. So that's 3 days minimum. If any corrections needed to be made, my team would have to manually create a Word version, email it to the underwriter, they would correct it, upload it to imaging, and send it to the mailroom. So that's more like a 5 or a 7 day process minimum. And it allows the agents to potentially see errors prior to having them corrected. So when we were designing our solution with ExpertTalk, we were able to create new print workflows, allowing underwriting to review, edit, and approve the documents prior to printing and imaging. This both removes my team from the process because underwriting can now edit the files themselves, and allows for approval of the documents prior to agent access. By redirecting the generated document, sorry, I just needed to break. By redirecting the generated documents to our review portal, we've eliminated a number of steps in the workflow. This is trimmed between 2 and 5 days off the time required to get the policy out the door, which is a significant amount of time. So this has been a great benefit to us and really just came out of working together with ExpertTalk to try to improve workflows that we did not originally intend to address. A benefit I was not really expecting was having access to the Smart Forms designer. I personally like to try to automate as much as I can wherever I can, and the Smart Forms are quite helpful with that. In the past, our department has manually created in-house form lists displaying the forms that are available in each state for each product, with a new version every time we have a filing. So that was fine back when we had 16 or so states. Now that we have all 50 states, this can be extremely time-consuming and difficult to quality control. So now that we have access to Smart Forms, we're developing a template that the staff will be able to access. So they'll enter the underwriting company, state, effective date of their policy, and product type, and they can actually generate their own form list on demand. So now every time we file a new form, we can just update our database, and the staff can do the rest of the work for us with no real impact to them. So not only have we seen benefits with external documents, but we've also been able to improve the management of our internal resources. And then aside from the actual product, I think one of the greatest benefits has been the relationship we've built with ExpertTalk. So as an organization, we're ever evolving. And as we expand and integrate, it's critical to have a team who will listen and innovate with us. We're currently in the planning stages for what we'd like to do next year. And while we have some items that need to be addressed, I'm mostly looking forward to just seeing what other enhancements we can come up with.
Well, thanks, Kate, and congratulations on the successful implementation.
Thank you.
At this point, I'm going to close out with just a couple of suggestions, a call to action for insurers. First, I would just say certainly balance these new demands in the digital world with the traditional requirements. You know, and this is why you need to think in terms of platforms. Even if you're just addressing an individual problem to start with, think about the longer term and the variety of requirements you're going to have to support in an omni-channel world. Secondly, look at customer communications across the life cycle, and understand the key role that documents and forms and other kinds of communications have, you know, vis-a-vis that inbound and outbound diagram that I showed. And then finally, build and execute a holistic plan for customer communications. So, you know, it's common for people to think about individual transactions or individual documents and how to improve those or make them more efficient. But ultimately, when you take the outside in view and you're thinking about it from a customer standpoint, you want to think more broadly and have a set of capabilities to support the kinds of expectations they have that we've talked about today. So at this point, thank you very much. I think it's been a great webinar, and we'll just close with that.